Wednesday, I think. Let's take a look at some charts for Brave New Coin DeFi day today. And in general, almost every chart looks identical to the DeFi perp 12-hour in that we are attempting some sort of W double bottom. We are attempting some sort of ascending triangle, Adam and Eve, all of which point to higher highs over lower lows. If we make another higher low and then make a lower low, it's game over. And what you're hoping for here is on all of these charts to make it over the hump of VPVR that most of these charts are in. So really, this is my guiding star as far as what's going on here across the board. This is really best case scenario, considering we were down 60% plus 70% in some cases. Curve was down 75%. And we're getting these not only mean reversion attempts, but in the DeFi perps case, back into the top end of the range. We have a defined, distinct range here. We exceeded the highs, exceeded the lows, and now we're back in the middle. And if we look at some options and possibilities here, as far as what to expect, this was Ethereum in 2018, 2019. Back then, at that time, at least I was focusing more on this Adam and Eve, which is basically where we are here on DeFi. We're kind of at this horizontal VU, arguably, or VV, whatever you want to call it. It's the beginnings of bullish reversal signs. Beyond this, we got another higher low, which took a month, right? So it's important not to get impatient here, because even if we get denied at this horizontal, which we should know in the next couple days, we could still form another higher low, end up fulfilling this ascending triangle pattern. So it's still a little open-ended as far as possibilities here, but at the end of the day, you'll know when we cross over that horizontal whether or not we've made it. Something else you want to see is a big spike in volume when we do cross over that horizontal, because it gives confidence for a continuation push past that. And we may even have a throwback after that. So again, we're not failing any of this until we're making lower lows, because if we make lower lows, then we're going to go lower, right? Like lower lows mean, in this case, in DeFi perps case, sub 4K, sub 5K certainly. I'd expect just absolute catastrophe across the board. It's not off the table. It's definitely a shrinking branch of the decision tree, but it's not there. Here's SNX on the daily threatening a bearish 5200 cross. Along with everything, really, it's kind of touch and go across the board. I am cautiously optimistic based on chart patterns that are forming. So again, this is probably the weakest case for any sort of W or anything like that, but as long as we're not making lower lows here, we are okay. And we will very likely see an attempt to move towards 20 or thereabouts. So what you'll first see is a complete reversal pattern, followed by a return to the middle of the range, followed by an attempt at returning to the highs, followed by an attempt at breaking out. In this case, it would be an all-time high. AAVE, very similar. AAVE looks much cleaner than SNX. AAVE looks much better off here than SNX. It had this multi-month inverted head and shoulders, broke up, immediately got slammed, and now it has this W on the 200-day moving average. So if there's anything to be confident about a reversal, it's charts like this where you're seeing confluence for mean reversion back to the 200 with multiple support attempts or attempts to get broken, right? Like we tried to break down here, couldn't, and now we're back at the 50. If you're bullish, you want to see higher highs. Again, it's not rocket science. It's all the same for all these charts. You want to see us break above the 50-day moving average. Ultimately, you want to see highs beyond 600 again. Maker, again, variation of that theme. Retraced the 200-day moving average and then some. Bounced better than almost everything except Matic in a couple days and still formed that W, or is forming that W. Higher highs are certainly expected there if you're bullish, obviously, and you don't want to see anything below 2,800. Link USD on the 2-day chart, also W, below the median line of the pitchfork. This is a multi-year pitchfork. The pitchfork held, buy zone, sell zone, and you can sort of measure the time component from low to high, how long this has taken. 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, overall not too long for basically a 2x plus. In this case, it would be certainly above 60, probably no higher than 80, and definitely not 100 just yet. That's probably Q3, Q4, like end of Q3, beginning of Q4 if it happens. But the important part here is we bounced to where we should have. Pick 3 points, you get a rate of change. We're at the midline. Currently, you're trying to return to that with a W on lower time frames, along with everything else. Sushi on the daily, again, W on the 200-day moving average. You've got a monthly pivot as resistance. You've got the 50 EMA as resistance. And this kind of exemplifies everything that I'm saying. Once again, just turn on monthly pivots and you'll see there's a pivot at the horizontal of the W. There's a pivot at the local high from the breakdown, and then there's a pivot above that, which would represent an all-time high for basically everything, where you could see targets go if all this is successful. If all of this is able to find strength again, then I like targets like 32 for Sushi, where it's an extension beyond all-time high. Uni, again, very similar. Resistance at 29.30, realistic target of 45 to 48, and then an extension target of 64. And that's possible within the month, like if you're thinking timing components, because we're getting very close to breaking up on all these charts. I mean, it's only a matter of days before we get an answer on all of these charts, whether or not they break these resistances at where they're at or not. 1 inch, again, like all these charts. That's the thing with DeFi. You can think like, oh, there's oracles, there's exchanges, there's lending and borrowing, there's DEX aggregation, there's other stuff like Ren, but ultimately all of it so far has traded identical, correlated extremely highly. Even Link, which is usually uncorrelated to everything, has traded identically to everything else. Here's 1 inch again, W below the range. You have a 12-hour bear cross that happened, but ultimately wants to return to round 5, which would be the sort of midline volume-wise of the range. Again, you're seeing pivot, pivot, pivot. So 420, whatever that is, 660, 10. Like those are the targets I'd be watching. 1050 actually. But the TA though is pretty straightforward. Comp, same thing. W double bottom, bearish 5200 cross on the 12-hour. Previously had this multi-week inverted head and shoulder breakup, and pivot, pivot, and there's another pivot, probably around 1000 on the way up. You're seeing a lot of VPVR resistance here, but ultimately every single chart is identical to comp. Now, what I do like about some of these charts is we're seeing a big volume spike. Curve is the earliest mover, up 35% over the past 24 hours. But this is what you're looking for. You're looking for a massive candle or series of candles with just an influx of volume. So Curve had its W, its neckline, whatever you want to call it, horizontal resistance, and it broke up, hit that pivot. Now it has to make more decisions, right, as it goes up, as it climbs that ladder. But this is the earliest mover of all of them, and seeing this volume spike is very encouraging compared to some of these other charts. Even ZRX, right? Like a lot of these charts are already showing signs of volume breaking up. Rather clean Adam and Eve here on the 12-hour W. Same thing, blah, 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 that I keep mentioning over and over again. Pivot, pivot, and then there's another pivot probably around 320, something like that. But it's going to have to fight through all this volume resistance on the way up. Balancer, again, look at this volume. This pattern looks like junk, right? This is one of the weaker cases, kind of like SNX, where it's just kind of this smushed W, but the volume is coming back in a big way in Balancer, and Balancer's got a long ways up. Balancer, unlike a lot of these charts that had a horizontal range, Balancer had this series of higher highs, kind of in an ascending triangle type pattern. And that's why it looks way worse than basically everything else does. But it's got resistance at 30, 37, and then 53. So seeing this volume, very encouraging. BNT, same thing. W, triangle, whatever you think it fits into, the volume is really, to me, one of the more important parts about all of this. Even Melon has had arguably more of an ascending triangle, hasn't gotten that volume just yet. This is Enzymes token, but it still looks fine for some sort of return to 100-ish. It had this ascending triangle quality to it that broke way down. So none of this stuff looks terrible. It looks pre-breakout except Curve. even rep, okay? Absolute garbage. Augur, you know? Look at this volume, right? So either somebody's going and buying in a bunch of stuff for no reason, or a bunch of people are getting positioned for these pre-breakout trades. You know, this morphed into, it went from like an inverted head and shoulders to an Adam and Eve to some sort of triangle. You know, this is the BTC chart basically on lower time frames, where you're getting wisps of all sorts of things, none of which are particularly super bearish, but haven't really broken up yet. In Rep's case, 30 to 31 would be resistance, and then 47 to 50. And then there's another extension probably around 80 on that pivot. But that would be best case scenario over the next few weeks. Here's band. Again, you're seeing this volume pop up here with this mess of a W thing start to get above its resistance around 9, 12, 20. You know, those are the targets I'd watch on the way up. Matic, very dissimilar to everything else. I don't necessarily believe this volume to be real. Anytime you see, especially on Binance, which is notorious for this, similar volumes every day, or volumes just trade super clean, there's usually some shenanigans going on there. Nevertheless, chart looks fine. You know, it's bounced harder, stronger, faster, better than anything else has. I don't know how much more this has in it. To me, it just looks like the trade has happened, and you're better off trading the pre-breakout stuff, but maybe I'm not on the Matic bandwagon enough. Here's Rune, very similar. Adam and Eve, W, ascending triangle, equilateral triangle, whatever this is. To me, like everything else, it leans slightly bullish. And if you want to follow along or watch me trade this stuff, you can pop on over to Enzyme.Finance, where I trade an ETH-BTC fund for Techemy Capital, as well as a DeFi portfolio for Techemy Capital. The DeFi portfolio got slammed over the past few weeks, and if the TA works out, should recover pretty decently over the next few weeks. This is non-custodial portfolio management, so you can send ETH or USDC and basically copy the trades that I take here. You can see AUM allocations, deposits, withdrawals, all the trades I make. They're all done through DEXs, and the same with the ETH-BTC fund. So that's all I have for this one. Like, dislike, comment, share, subscribe, and happy trading.